Hey everybody, welcome back to Meet the Makers. Today I am here with another 3D printer. He prints, he paints, he has a Voron and a whole bunch of other crazy stuff that you're probably going to be jealous of. I am so excited, Willie, to welcome you here today to the Meet the Makers podcast.
Thank you for having me.
This is always a question I jump off with everybody on. How did you get involved in 3D printing and just makers in general?
I originally started becoming a maker with my father. He always embraced my curiosity when it comes to making. When I was just like, hey, I want to take apart the radio, he would turn around and be like, yeah, you could take it apart, but you got to make sure you put it back together or you're paying for it. I learned very quickly that I was able to do and make things and create things, but I had to clean up and also fix the things that I'm doing and working with. But to get into 3D printing, so originally I was involved with special effects. I went to SUNY Purchase College and I studied to be a technical director for special effects, scenery construction. And when I moved into Queens, I didn't have a workshop. I didn't have anything. It's really hard to start sanding and making props and making things on a 2-bedroom apartment, which, again, sand and everything will get all over the place. I really wanted to get a 3D printer. And what happened was one of my birthdays, I think it was 2019, my friends actually chipped in and bought me my first 3D printer. And that's where it took off. It was a G-Tech A10 series 3D printer. It was like a $200 printer, which I burnt out twice. I don't know how I did it, but I did it. And then I upgraded to a CR10. And that's what kind of like evolved from there. And that's how I got into 3D printing. It always interested me, and I finally got one.
That's such a sweet way that you got into 3D printing. I loved hearing that story. What was the first 3D printer that you had?
G-Tech A10.
Okay.
And
would that be like comparable maybe to like current day like Ender? What was that printer like?
It was Ender 3 clone, actually.
Okay.
It was a clone of an Ender 3. And it was pretty neat because the Ender 3 didn't come with filament runout, didn't come with auto bed leveling, it didn't come with a glass bed. So in it was fun. If you look at one of the very first TikToks I ever had, if you look in the back where I did a video where I panned over to my snake's tank where I made a tunnel for my snake. You can actually see that the CR10 with all my mods and everything on it. And unfortunately, like I said, I burnt the damn thing out.
Oh man, that's crazy. Now, how does one go about burning out a printer? Because now you have me worried that maybe I'm going to burn out my printer. What were you doing with this printer?
Printing 24/7 nonstop.
Okay, that sounds like we might be in that situation at some point soon then.
I'll be honest, because it was one of the older printers. It was a budget-friendly printer. So I don't think the newer printers would have that issue. It's just, but I also was a lot of neglect on my side. So again, Amazon is wonderful when it comes to returns. So I went through, they gave me another one when I returned the second one. I was just like, okay, cool. And then I sent that one back when it was just like, oh crap, this thing broke again. So then I said, you know what? I just upgraded to a CR10. And I actually don't have that CR10 anymore. I actually just recently donated it to SUNY Poly, because they have a bunch of Ender 3s, and I was just like, hey, I got this big Creality printer that I need to get rid of because I don't have any room for my projects. I was like, do you want it? And they took it, and now they're actually currently working with it today.
Oh, that's pretty cool. I'm from Buffalo, New York. I think you're in Utica, New York?
Yep, you're over that far.
Yeah, no, I was originally from Buffalo. I moved out to Arizona because Buffalo was a little too cold for me. But yeah, hearing you talk about SUNY schools, it brings me right back. I went to UB, University of Buffalo, and it's a pretty big school. I imagine maybe they had 3D printers there, but I never had seen them. Do they have a program at that school for engineering? Is that in the engineering department? Is it in the art department? Where does that printer live?
So it's actually a makerspace. At first, it is a makerspace, but also during school, it is a 3D printing lab. And one of the projects at the college is to actually build and upgrade an Ender 3. Like the professor is just like, here's an Ender 3 kit. Have fun with it, do something. So you have them converting it to a laser engraver, you have them turning into a direct drive. They do Ender extender kits. Like it just like brainstorms and have these young adults to get into engineering because it's so easy to modify an Ender 3, which is why Thingiverse is so plentiful with mods and stuff. They turned it into an actual program, which is wonderful. They have like Formlab printers, they have a bunch of other printers, but like their main concentration is they have 5 or 6 Enders for the group. It's pretty impressive.
That's super cool to hear. I've never heard of, I'm like a little far removed from college these days, but Yeah, that's really cool to hear. Like I said, maybe there was a program, or maybe there wasn't back when I was in school. But yeah, I think like the thing that I always say about 3D printers that I think is amazing is it's a really good introduction to whether you want to call it engineering or STEM or just,
Hmm.
I guess it falls under all those. But I think it's a great introduction for people because it lets you dip your toes into modifying things, tinkering with things, engineering with things. But it's like a really rewarding thing in the sense that like you get to make cool stuff with it. So I love hearing younger people getting into the hobby and having different ways to approach it.
3D printing actually really exploded with budget-friendly printers from like 2014, I think it was. And it evolved to what it is today. You have the Voron community. You have the cosplay community. Before 3D printing was big, people were making Iron Man suits out of foam and fiberglass.
Yeah.
And you can imagine how of a headache that was. So 3D printing really opened up the world for not just engineering, but also for cosplays and just as a utilitarian. Like, for an example, I bought a motorcycle mount off a website that straps to the chin that just plugs into my helmet, and it's 3D printed. And it's going into today, day and age's products. And it's amazing because I had a conversation recently at NoCoCon where there's just like, are you worried about the waste that 3D printing could make because it's using plastics? And my caveat when I talked to him was, think about this. Manufacturing companies make, if you have 50 orders, all right, you make 100 parts or 100 things to have a backlog. So if you get hit with another bit of orders, you can satisfy the orders while you make. It's like a buffer. With 3D printing now is you can make them on demand. You can make as much as you need. So it's the lack of waste versus if there is now like you have 2,000 freaking parts and guess what? They're going to go into landfill because nobody wants those 2,000 parts. It's really opened up the world, to be honest with you.
But I think what's interesting to me is machines like the Bamboo Lab comes out and it's becoming more of a thing where maybe you don't need to have an engineering background to run a 3D printer. Anybody could start running a 3D printer. It's not just that now somebody in their home, like you were saying, can make like these one-off parts as they need them, but even from a standpoint of now, I'm not ordering stuff from Amazon every single day. Maybe I'm only
Yep.
ordering every other day because I can make things that I might need and I don't have to have it packaged up in a box and then in plastic and then bubble wrapped. I think that's an interesting component that it also potentially could cut down on over time if you have more people who have the ability to make stuff right in the house. So it'll be interesting to see how that also evolves over time.
It also cuts down downtime when equipment breaks. So for an example, my garbage disposal, the ones that go into the sink and everything, the gasket broke. I had water spewing all over the bottom of my sink.
Okay.
And so what I did was I took the gasket out, looked at it, measured it with my calipers, and I cat it up. I have SolidWorks on my computer and I made it and I printed it out of TPU. And it's still sitting in 6 months later, it's still sitting there and it's still working great. Again, that's the part of the caveat, which is pretty nice, is because now you don't have to worry about that. You can now make parts on demand. I don't know if but NASA actually started doing 3D printing in space.
Yeah.
And what's happening is because instead of sending a toolbox, which is it's got down of weight and everything, they just send up a spool of filament. And if for some reasons the engineers up there is just, hey, we need which actually happened, a wrench that does 3-inch per a pound per torque. It's okay. So they designed it here, tested it here, sent up the file, and they printed it in space in zero gravity, and it worked. Now they can make tools on demand instead of sending a crap ton of tools up. They can make these specific tools.
I'm a huge space nerd and I like always loved the International Space Station. So when I heard that they were using 3D printers there, I was just like so excited. I thought that was the coolest thing ever. Now, to back up a little bit, you started talking about you were speaking of NoCoCon. For people who aren't familiar with that, can you tell us a little bit about what that is?
Sure. So NoCoCon is an upstate New York convention that happens in Watertown, New York. This was my second year there. They asked me to come. And last year we had Panda Red, who was there, Eric at Katasaurus, where Eric and I had a maker challenge. We've had the Barb of TikTok, Kurt Wise, and we were just there and we were having a great time. And then this year we had Panda Red came again. We also had Jenna, who does the Star Wars cosplays. You had Sapphire Stardust, who does the Dolores Imperial HR person. We had Roll for Sandwich there, and we had Props to History, Mike, there. And Mike and I went one-on-one, and needless to say, Mike and I got close. At the end of the Maker Challenge, we got duct taped together.
Yeah, I was so excited for you to come here today because I've been dying to ask you, what was the situation? How did you guys end up duct taped together? Because I saw the video and I have so many questions.
Mike and I, so we were talking, and Mike is looking at me. He's, I've never done any of these before. What do you do? And so forth. And I literally told him, I was like, let's just have fun with it. Let's put on a show for the audience, shenanigans. I throw something at you, you throw something at me, some trash talk, and just have fun with it. That's really what it comes down to. And at some point, like when there's the countdown was happening, I looked at Mike, and it was like, we were synced up. We knew what we wanted to do. And I did a whole leg's worth of duct tape. And he did a whole leg's, and we just went over and hugged each other with the duct tape. And it got to a point where I kept going and I kept going because Mike kept going, and we just kept going, and we were ended up duct taping. And to the point where now people are recording us, and Mike's like, honey, it's not what it looks like, I swear. And it was so much fun. But so the challenge that day was we had to make a prop for a cosplayer or somebody at the con. So Mike actually made a cardboard sandwich for Roll for Sandwich. And I was there because Cosplay Mutt was there with, he had a van he repainted and everything from Steven Universe, and a motorcycle that was a replica from The Walking Dead. It was Daryl's motorcycle, which was so cool. So what I did was he had a bunch of guitars. So I made him a guitar, which I used 3D printing material, like filament for the strings. It was his guitar, but it was there. Mike ended up winning the challenge. So my crown is taken off to him. But I think what's going to end up happening is there may be a guest appearance at next year's NoCoCon where Mike's going to have to defend his title. Who knows?
That sounds like one of the funnest conventions I've ever heard of. Now, for that convention, was it specifically for mostly cosplayers go there, or was there a lot of people who also did 3D printing and kind of a mix of both?
I was actually the only 3D printing person there. So James and Ember, who was the directors of NoCoCon, actually met me at Syracuse Maker Faire, who I volunteer for every year, meaning like I set up a booth, and I just like educating kids and young makers about 3D printing because they have so many questions. So they invited me, and they invite other TikTokers and content creators, and it's such an honor to actually be able to share a stage with them. And at my booth, what I ended up doing, and I believe I forgot who you had another podcast with, but they said that during their events they have 3D printers printing. I do the same exact thing because what she said was absolutely right. You have no idea how many times people don't see 3D printers printing and they don't understand how it works. I actually have a 3D printed cross section of a hot end, and I'll have a printer printing, and people ask me questions, and I'll explain how it works as an educational standpoint, which is why I do maker fairs in both Rochester and Syracuse, because I like to do these type of events. So last year I was supposed to be at Maker Faire in Rochester, but unfortunately I got COVID. I'm extremely upset because I was supposed to be right next to Uncle Jesse at the events as well.
He's in Rochester too, isn't he?
Yeah, so hopefully this year I get to do Maker Faire again.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah, no, what a bummer. And out of all the places that you could have ended up next to and not been there, oh, that sucks. But yeah, hopefully this year, maybe you guys will be neighbors again. That would be super cool. Yeah. Now, so I saw it recently, like, I'm not sure how long ago it was that you built it, but you have your Voron. It's amazing. I love that you named it. I love that it's like, it has its whole theme around it. What was that process like, and what made you go down that path of building that?
So I built a Voron because my coworker, his name is Glenn, told me about the Voron, and I thought it was such a cool idea that a 3D printed parts built a 3D printer. And I thought it was such an awesome idea. And I actually just bought my Prusa when he told me about this too. So at the same time, I built my Prusa, I got an enclosure, and I printed the parts for the Voron. It's all open source. You can buy kits for the hardware, but you have to print your parts. Now, for anybody who's looking to build a Voron, they had something called the PIF system. It's called Print It Forward, where somebody will actually print the parts for you to give you a functional Voron, which is I plan on signing up or trying to sign up because it's a very hard process to get involved with because they have specific settings and specific things they have to do, and you have to go through a whole criteria for it. I chose to do Clockwork because, and I guess what we named it Clockwork is because I really like the idea that the Greek mythology, there was a mechanical owl assistant. And I was like, that's perfect because the 3D printers, I consider my 3D printers as my assistants when I'm in my shop. So I bring Clockwork to all my events. Unfortunately, it's also too big to fit in my truck. So I have to put it in bed, and there is an omen to this printer because every single time I bring it to an event, it rains. So I have to wrap it in tarps and everything. So I said, all right, that's enough. I'm going to be doing live streaming soon on Twitch, where I'm going to be doing workshop Wednesdays, where I'm going to be building a Voron Triton, and I'm going to be building a Voron 0.2, both collaborated with Mather.
For the longest time, I'm like I might as well be 90 years old at heart. I didn't know much about what people did on Twitch, but it's cool hearing it seems like a lot of 3D printers go there, and I've never heard of somebody doing something like that. Sounds like a super exciting series. I have to check that out.
My Trident I'm building is going to be Decepticon themed. I actually chose specific filament that it's called Decepticon Purple. So it's going to be mainly purple. I'm going to have panels laser.
That's exciting. It's funny hearing you talk about your printers and yours have themes, and I know you've referred to them as your assistants, which I think of my printers in a similar sense. I feel like a lot of people in the maker community almost personify their printers, and they have personalities or they have a bit of an attachment to them. Now I have all the printers that I've ever owned. I've never sold a printer. I've never really gotten rid of a printer. Do you have a certain attachment to your printers, and have you ever been sad getting rid of one of your printers?
So I'm in the engineering field, and if you want to talk more about that, we can, because actually 3D printing helped me get my job. And an engineer once told me, his name is Andrew. He once told me, he goes, if you keep on tinkering with it, how long are you going to tinker with it until it is not worth tinkering with anymore? Meaning, when you're going to start, when is enough to, when you're working on a printer, as much more than you are actually printing with that printer.
Yeah.
And that's what happened with me with my CR10. And I was like, this is a perfect opportunity for the college to learn how to repair a printer. That's why I gave them my CR10. Now, everybody's, oh, you just gave them a problem. I'm like, yes, but I also gave them a learning experience because I didn't want to mess with it anymore. And then Artillery 3D sent me the Hornet, and I donated that to Whitesboro Middle School because they were looking for new printers as well, because my neighbor is actually a school teacher there. I don't think I would ever give up the Prusa because it helped forge my Voron. And I will never give up the Vorons because I just put so much work into it. It's not like you're a snap maker or an ender or anything where you bolt the pieces again, connect the wires, and that's it. You get to printing. You're literally you're heat pressing in all the parts. You're assembling all the parts. You're filing down the parts. You are running the wires. You're installing all the electrical components. You are literally handling with the PSU, going ahead and plugging everything in and doing the config file for the firmware. You're doing everything. And when you have that much effort into a printer, you really don't want to get rid of it because it does become part of you in a way. In the words of what Adam Savage would used to say, is that a part of you is in your own makerspace. Your makerspace is part of you. And and parts of me is part of those printers, and I don't want to get rid of part of myself. It's one of the reasons why I keep some of my props in the shop hung up, because I like to see the progression of where everything happens. I like to see where my first prop was ever made and where my prop is what I'm making now. So it's really cool seeing how everything can progress over time.
Yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that about maker spaces. Until I got into 3D printing, I guess I had never heard of the phrase maker. That just wasn't something I thought of. But I guess I'd watch Mythbusters and see the space that they had. Or I was a big Casey Neistat fan, and I loved Casey's studio. I just remember I would watch all of his videos, and I was just obsessed. And I didn't quite know then that I had never heard of the term makers, or I just thought that they had maybe that kind of aesthetic or whatever. But thinking now, I'm like, oh, I can see so much of them is in that space. And exactly to your point, I slowly, the deeper that I get into this, the slower my space around me is evolving into all my different projects. And I really love that. But even to that point, I know one of the things you had talked about was like how much time you put into a machine. And sometimes you get to the point of no return. That's honestly like my first Ender when I look back. Like I got that thing and I just modified the shit out of that. Everything that I could throw at it, and it doesn't barely ever runs anymore. It's like my least used printers. I think there is definitely something to be said. It's really maybe fun when you're new to tinker and modify things. I would encourage people to do that because I think it teaches you so much about your printer, but it's like a double-edged sword because I think you could definitely overdo it as well.
Yeah, I definitely, and that's what happened with my my G-Tech A10. That's exactly what happened to it. I overdid it, but I truly feel, and again, people may disagree with me on this. I think everybody should build at least a Voron 0.2, the smallest one. And the reason behind that is because I significantly learned more about 3D printing, taking apart a machine and building it from the bones up than I ever did. And I have more of a solid understanding of 3D printing because of that. And I'm glad I took up the challenge.
Because now you have an engineering background. Okay, so did your Voron precede you being in engineering?
So like I said, I went to school for special effects. I started off at SUNY Purchase College, and I went to school with Tommy Lee Jones's daughter, where my professors did Rock of Ages, they did Wicked, they did the halftime show. Like I was in the industry for a short period of time, and I left after 2 years because I didn't want to do it anymore. And I got into 3D printing, and sure enough, my father-in-law turned around to me and he said, listen, they work for a manufacturing company. They're like, we really need a tech who's good at tinkering and troubleshooting. And I think you fit the bill. And he goes, of course, I can't be there for the interview and everything. He goes, but I do think you fit the bill. I'm like, okay. So I applied for the job, and sure enough, I did the interview, and I will never forget the day. In my interview, towards the tail end, they're like, hey, is there anything you want to talk about or anything? How about your own personal projects? And then they lean into the microphone, and they say, so how's your Sweet Tooth RC car coming out? And I'm like, wait a second, what? I'm like, I'm in a professional interview. I am literally in like a college shirt sitting in my chair, and you're asking me about my RC car? Excuse me? And they're like, yeah, we followed you on social media and looked at your Instagram and everything. Because again, they do that for the background checks. And they're like, we're actually impressed in how enthusiastic you are at 3D printing because they handle automated machines. I'm like, oh, okay. So I explained to them and everything. And about a week later, I get a phone call from the job, and they said, hey, we want to offer you a position here at Utica's facility. I'm like, but I don't have manufacturing background or engineering. They're like, don't worry, we'll take care of that. We'll put you through. We know you're good for it. So I'm like, all right, cool. A year later, after I'm with the company, I got promoted to be an engineering technician. So I'm with the R&D team, research and development, developing new machines. And the company turns around and says, hey, how about being an engineer for us at one point? I'm like, yeah, like I would love to be an engineer, right?
Yeah.
They're actually now helping me go to school and helping cover tuition because to get me my engineering degree. And I'm sitting here and I'm just like, my friends gave me my first 3D printer because I just wanted it as a hobby. And now I'm doing it as a profession with automated machines. And I am doing TikTok on the side. Like that's what it is for me. And it evolved, and it's truly a kind of like surreal how things could just evolve to what it is when you least expect it. And I think one of my very first videos that actually would have got super popular was I posted a Venom Deadpool statue that I made, and people loved it. And I'm like, all right, let me just keep on posting stuff that I make. And it just kept growing and growing. And I'm like, all right, this is just my hobby. I'm not doing this as a career, but now I'm doing engineering. So now I go to work and handle automated machines, and I come home and guess what I'm doing? Handling with automated machines. So
I love stories like that of like people almost like falling into things by accident, or just, I guess, if you want to call it fate or however it happened. That I just love that story. For you now, what I guess I'm curious about is you had like a traditional start, like you went to college, you did the more traditional path, but then you almost, whether if you want to call it by accident or by fate, you created your own separate path. I guess like for you, would you recommend people, like maybe somebody young listening to this, I'm always like torn if I think like young kids should go to college these days. What's like your take on that based on the path that like your career went?
My actual experience and professional opinion, because I can say that now, is go to school, get your 2 degree in your humanities and your basic course. Do that. And then I always say, take the year off and try as many jobs as you can. Try a job doing this, try a job doing that, trying a job doing this, and find where you land. And if you're like, okay, this is something I like to do, I'm comfortable in this position and doing this job. So what I always suggest is once you find that job, and Robin Williams would say, find your voice, then go to school for it. There are numerous companies, and if the company doesn't offer this, leave the company. That's the first advice I will also give as well. There's numerous number of companies who would love to help you further your education, because not only does it benefit you, but it benefits them. Because now they have a trained professional, someone who is educated in the field, who is in now who has the training. Because the caveat of doing it for them to taking care of your tuition, portions of your tuition, is you have to be there for 3 or 4, maybe even 5 years after you graduate. Which honestly, 3 or 4, 5 years, why like that? After those 5 years, go off and do whatever the hell you want. All right. Once I get my degree, I could leave my company and go to Lockheed Martin. I can go to Cree. I can go to this. I can go to that. I can do whatever I want. Am I going to? No, because I really like the company I work for. But it gives the opportunity. And now when I found out by mistake, SUNY Purchase College, I have 56 college hours at that college. The college I'm in now accepted only 2 classes. SUNY Poly and MVCC would not accept any. And that was just because it was in the career. But which is lucky of the one I'm involved with, they accepted my humanities and they accepted my English. If you take your core classes and have your associates, you can go straight into getting your bachelor's into a field that you want. And now you don't have to worry about those cores. You just have to take the classes that you need to go into. And you can benefit from it. Unfortunately, and I'm going to say it this way, I wasted my time going to college and not getting my degree. Now, is it a complete waste? No, I did a lot of growing up. But it helped me evolve and learn what I want to do. I went into special effects because I wanted to feel close with my father, because he passed away when I was 16. And that's the last thing him and I did together. And as traumatizing that was, I kept up with it because I wanted to keep on doing what I did with him. And I learned that at a very late age that I don't want to do this. I just did this for the convenience of being close with him again. I let my emotions get involved. Now I'm involved with engineering and I love it. And I know that's what he would want for me. And so don't be afraid to get into a field and then be afraid that you don't like that field. Get your cores done and then you can do whatever the hell you want.
Yeah, I it's so interesting hearing you say that, because it's like I can almost look back on my life and it seems so like, I don't want to say obvious, but like it makes sense now. And I crossed like a different but a similar path to you. I started in the medical field when I was going to college. And it was like, honestly, one of the most difficult things I had done up to that point in my life, where I had decided that was like not what I wanted to do anymore and just completely switch paths. And I think for a lot of people, when you're young and, you know, you're going down a certain path, it feels, you know, it's scary, or it's just like, it feels like maybe you're almost like, it sounds crazy like now being older, but like when you're 19, you're like, I have to finish this because I've wasted all this time. But you're so young. You can literally change your mind 1,000 times and it's okay. But yeah, I personally can relate to like just being young and thinking like, oh, this is it. This is what I have to do forever. And I can't change my mind. So I think it's important to know that you can.
And that's my biggest problem with the school education system. And I know we can go really deep down into this rabbit hole, but that is my problem with the school education system in grade schools, like for an example, like high school. And the reason behind that is because they tell you, oh, you have to make up your mind now. You have to do this now. You have to go into this college to do this. No, you don't have to do anything. Get your degree and get your associates, and humanities are something that will transfer over. Do some growing up and figure out what you want to do with the rest of your life, and then do it. because now you
Yeah.
could transfer those credits. Because there was a time when I was in special effects, somebody was a culinary expert, and they were just like, nope, I want to do special effects now, and they're great at it. But that's where they started. And the other advice I can give to, honestly, is that, and this is gonna make a bunch of people mad, but I don't care. Colleges, certain jobs don't give a rat's ass of what college you went to and got your degree, as long as you have your degree. All right. They don't care if you got it at DeVry University. They don't care if they got it if you went to Yale or anything else. All right. They're not going to look at your grades. Pass, walk out with a piece of paper, and get the job you want.
Yeah. Yeah, we're definitely gonna make we're not making friends right now, but I could agree with you a lot on that. I work in software now, and I know a lot of people maybe, to clarify, I'm not like a developer, I'm on the product management side, but I know a lot of people think about software and they think like you have to, that's like a very specific like path you have to go down, you have to have a degree, you have to have good grades, you have to go to certain colleges. And exactly to your point, when I have a degree, but they could have cared less if I even had my degree for the role that I'm in now. I started in sales and I worked my way up in that company to the product position. And it's so much of what you're doing. I think, again, when you're young, so many people are like making you think that a piece of paper that you're going to get is what's going to define your success for the future. But it's so important to know that you define your path, and putting in hard work. It might not be the path that you think that you're going to go down, but if you just consistently show up and put in work, it will take you where you want to go in life. And I think that's something that isn't communicated enough to young people. And I hope maybe some young person will stumble upon this and hopefully decide that they can maybe explore a different path.
Yeah, and I know we're going to make some people angry, but here's the thing is, I'm not saying that school's a waste, and I'll never say that. Or what college is a waste, or what college you go to is a waste. I would never, ever say that. You know what? Because for an example, Lockheed would never accept someone from DeVry. They won't. But they will accept someone who went to a Pacific, let's just say SUNY Alfred, who is an engineering school. All right. But it matters on what your values are. I guess what I'm saying is that if you want to work at something and chase that paycheck and get that 6-digit paycheck and get for a company who doesn't even know your name, or work for a company that I work for who, granted, I'm not making 6 digits, but I get a turkey every year. The CEO knows my name. He actually sends me letters saying happy birthday. He follows me on TikTok and he actually interacts with my videos. It's very personable. And that for me is a value, knowing that I have skin in the company. Then I'm not a number, I guess what I'm saying.
Yeah, that's the final piece of advice that I'll give. And it's like you said, everybody's going to have a different path that they want to go down. But my experience personally is I've also been in a small company and I've loved that path so much. Again, I think a lot of people lean towards those bigger, well-known companies, but I love working for a small business. And exactly like you said, I love that I know every single person that works there. I'm close with the CEO. I'm close with every person that's there. And I think it's a really good way to be able to level up in your career. I think it gives you the opportunity maybe to try things that you might not have the opportunity to do at a bigger company. So I guess that's where I'll leave it at. You talked about your Sweet Tooth RC car. I saw it. I wasn't like a huge Twisted Metal person. I have played a few times, but as soon as I saw that, I thought that was the coolest. Are you into RCs previously, or was that the first one that you did?
That was my very first RC car. And the reason why I did it is because I'm really into Twisted Metal. Like right here, I have the pop figure signed by the voice actor. I have a replica mask. I have a statue. Like, I'm a big Twisted Metal fan. And the fact that they're coming out with the TV show in July 27th, I am stoked. But one day I woke up and I said, I want to build an RC car, and I want to build a Sweet Tooth RC car. You don't see one of those. I literally just took whatever avenue I can to teach myself how to do it. I took an ice cream truck from Thingiverse, hollowed it out, and took things apart and printed it. It took me about 5 kilograms of material to print this damn thing, because half of it was supports. But it definitely was a challenge because I had to worry about weight with the chassis, and I had to figure out, because the chassis was hitting the wheel. So I had to make to rise up the body. I was like, okay, I want to add sounds to it. quick Google search, about 2 days worth of research, I figured out how to do sounds. I never had an RC car ever, like from of that caliber. But I said, screw it, I want to make one. And I think that is, and as you would say, pivot back over to the hobby. That's what it's really nice about 3D printing, is because you can, if something inspires you and something that you're interested in, you could just make it. And for an example, Emily and Frank, they made Iron Man suits. And that's crazy. I'm working on an Iron Man suit right now. Yeah, surprise. And then I'm also working on I'm building I'm building a 3D printer from a 3D printer. It's one of the reasons why I say at every one of my videos, and you probably even see it, and a bunch of other people have seen it who watch my videos, and I say, stay creative. And the reason why I stay creative is because without creativity or something that inspires you, half the shit we would have in this world would not be created. Someone in the right mind decided, let's make curved monitors. Why? Because we can. They got creative with it. How did they figure out to put foam over our Blue Yetis? Because I see you have one as well. Yeah. Because they think outside the box. I feel like personally, with people are so worried about what other people are thinking, so they're afraid to become creative and do something outside of the box because they're afraid to fail and also make a fool out of themselves. So whenever I say stay creative, I want to make sure that it's what Adam Savage would like to say, a permission slip to fail. Here's your permission slip to think outside the box and to fail and do what you want to do and do how you want to do it, not how somebody else wants to do it. And that's how I've always looked upon it. So when I made the RC car, I was like, I want to build it this way, and this is how I'm going to do it. And if I fail and I screw up, fine, I failed and I screwed up. I went through that whole truck, took 5 kilograms of filament, and not because it took 5 kilograms, it's because I had to go through maybe if the prints fail like 3 or 4 times when I was building it. And that's what happens in 3D printing. You have to plan ahead. You're gonna fail. You're gonna have, and don't let it pull you from your project. Take a second, walk away from it, and think about it. Because the world's brightest minds is the most creative. An engineer once told me, if engineers did not fail, we would have flying cars by now. So why not? And another quote that Frankly Built would say, if you have an idea and it looks dumb, but it works, it's not dumb. So it's one of those type of things. It's just do it. And so I woke up one morning and I was just like, I want to build a Sweet Tooth RC car. Let's do it.
I myself, and I think a lot of the internet is glad that you did do it, because if you haven't seen it, you need to go watch the video because it's fucking cool. It's all I'll say. Now, I guess a final question that I'll leave you here with is, I loved what you said about, don't be afraid to fail. And I think that a lot of times I think the things that I do when like the projects fail, they, for me at least, almost push you to be more innovative, and they push you to solve problems in a way that like maybe you wouldn't have thought of otherwise if it just had gone completely right the first time. Maybe it was the RC car, but were there any other projects that you can think of that you worked on leading up to this point that maybe were like, I don't know if maybe you just hit a wall and you're like, I can't finish this, and came back at a later point? Or I guess, what would you say has been the biggest project that you've worked on that was like the most difficult for you to get through?
So what do you mean by most difficult? Do you mean ones that I haven't finished yet, like my Venom Stitch, which has been haunting me since or
now that you mention it, because I was curious to know about the Venom Stitch.
Yeah, I still haven't filled and sanded because I just been so busy. But no, it is still on my to-do list, but I'm trying to finish, now that I said it, I'm trying to finish the Iron Man suit that I'm doing for KatsuCon. So I'm trying to finish really hard to get that going. I have almost 20 kilograms of material in the basement right now, so you're gonna be seeing a lot of that soon. And once I finish these Vorons, I plan on posting videos on the helmet and everything I finished, because I finished the helmet.
Okay.
But when it comes to a project that gave me the most problems and that kind of pushed me outside my comfort zone and gave me the most issues, definitely was Clockwork, the Voron. I have no experience when it comes to programming, and don't ask me to configure a file without a guide, because I might as well just burn the damn thing. I built the printer. I'm great with building things, tinkering things, wiring and everything. I spent literally maybe about 2 weeks trying to figure out how to program this thing. And then when I turned around and I was just like, that's it. Next week is Maker Faire and I want to show this off at Maker Faire, but I can't fix this. Thank God there's a Voron Discord, because I sat in the Discord, talked to a bunch of people, and they helped me program it, and they helped me sit there and troubleshoot it, and they gave me a bunch of tips and everything. And I'm like, I'm not completely confident, but I'm confident enough that I could figure it out. And that's what I mean by don't be afraid to get out of your comfort zone, because here's the thing. I learned so much from building that Voron, and learned so much building those printers and also getting out of my comfort zone. Then I just grew from the experience, between professional as like a career, or moving into from Buffalo to Arizona, or from Long Island to Utica. Take a risk. And because you know what, life isn't, if you don't take risks in life and make yourself uncomfortable in certain situations, there is no, you won't grow. And so when I built that printer, I was just like, holy shit, here we go.
It's the thing that I always end up on this topic in every single podcast that we do is not when you're taking on these challenges too. I think that this space is such a great space to do it, in the sense that there's such a community. And like you said, whether it's the Voron Discord or whether it's the people on TikTok, there is always somebody here who has been in your shoes and wants to help you. And I think the people in this community are just so patient and so happy to help people along. So that would be a huge thing that I would just say. And especially, I am somebody, I'm shy, I'm an introvert, and I hate asking for help. But if you're that kind of person and maybe you're a little nervous to put yourself out there, ask for help, I promise in this community, people will be so receiving and happy to help you. Definitely, I agree. I think put yourself outside of your comfort zone. And every time that I've done that, I've been so surprised that I've been able to push the limits of what I've been able to do. And it sounds like you've had a similar experience.
Yeah, there are some people, like, don't get me wrong, there are trolls out there who would be like, oh, where'd you get that STL file when the print failed? Or, oh, for some reason, my hot end exploded. Did you level the bed? It's like the typical jokes. But the thing is, there's a lot of people, I'm one of them, where if someone who is very introverted, who doesn't want to talk to strangers, who can't figure it, like, that's one of the reasons why I leave my email open. And also I have an open communication policy with my channel, meaning like my Discord is open, my Instagram is open, everything is open to the public. The amount of spam from bots I get is unbelievable, but I do that because every now and then I get somebody who's, hey, how do you fix this issue? And if I don't know how to fix it, I'll reach out to the community for them and then reframe the information. Even if it's the littlest thing, I'll take the heat. I don't care. As someone like me, I don't care if I take the heat. I'll take the heat so you can go ahead and learn from the experience. There was a time where in Maker Faire, this kid was just like, I can't get my printer's bed to fit, and I can't get it to fix and be able to level, and I'm getting over extruding and this and that. I'm just like, okay, hold on a second. Here's my email. Send me an email of all your issues. And I did a breakdown sheet from this and this. Sent it down to him. This 10-year-old kid sent me an email saying, thank you so much. I kid you not when I tell you this. He's thank you so much. The printer's working beautifully. I pretty appreciate the help. That is what it called a community, an open source, open policy community. And if you can't do that, then we can't grow. All right. 3D printing is not where it is today if it wasn't before open source, and if it wasn't for open communication for people to grow. And it's wild. Whoever knew of metal 3D printing and bio 3D printing with printing organs from 2014, it was wild. The fastest moving 3D printer in 2014 was like 40 millimeters a second. Now you have people like freaking 24/7 3D printing who is doing a freaking Voron 0.2 who's printing at 2000 millimeters a second. I'm like, that is wild to me. That's a 2-minute benchy. And it's what he learned and open source and took suggestions from the community. And it's all about growth in the community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And honestly, nothing warms my heart more than those stories of hearing people who, like, it, even when it's a small issue, but just helping them troubleshoot that problem. And I think it means so much. Like, I know I've been that person where, like, it's been something so small, and like somebody who has experienced like could solve the problem in 30 seconds, but having somebody just be there to coach you through that, it means so much. So if you're new to this community, don't be afraid to ask. And if you're not new to this community, definitely, if you can help, I say it always comes back to you. If you can give, I think you always get back.
We've all been there. We've all been that 10-year-old kid who doesn't know how to calibrate the E-steps for over extruding or doesn't know how to level a bed. And I keep reminding people that don't gate the community. We've all started somewhere. People are starting later, but also, and the more popularity this hobby gets, it's going to happen. Don't forget about that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I could not agree more. I have had such a great time talking to you today. I feel like we've gone through 1,000 different topics since we started an hour ago, but I appreciate you so much for coming on here. Can you let people know where they can follow you and follow along with your projects that you're working on?
Yeah, I'm on. So as it says, I'm WilliesPaintNPrint. I'm usually on TikTok or Instagram. Streaming is going to be WilliesPaintNPrint. I actually was able to lock that down. And I also have and if you're on Instagram or TikTok, my link tree has everything. It actually has any upcoming events that I'm doing. So if you want to actually come and meet me and talk shop, I'm willing to do that. And also my email's on there. So if you ever want to reach out, please feel free.
Thank you again for coming on today.
Of course.
It's a pleasure having you. It's a pleasure hearing about your projects. And with that said, that is Meet the Makers.